and welcome to this episode of Awkward Conversations. We are talking about co-parenting. I have some wonderful guests today. I am joined by Amy McCarthy, who is our fabulous LCSW. She works at Boston's Children's Hospital and is an amazing source of information and has joined us for each episode. And also, we have a very special guest today, Judith Weigle, who is a legal document assistant, mediator, and podcast host of the Amicable Divorced Expert podcast, and also the Constructive Uncoupling podcast. Now, children of divorce, statistically are about 3 times more likely to suffer from drug and alcohol abuse than children of non-divorce, but that does not mean that that you can't mitigate the circumstances and do your very best as co-parents and as parents to help your kids work through this together. So I'm really excited to have this conversation with you today. Judith, welcome so much. Divorce is not always an easy situation. As a mediator, what have you found are some of the best ways for people to do that?
Well, first of all, parenting in one household does have its challenges, but it's a little bit easier because you're right there together as a family and you can kind of catch each other in the midst of making decisions in front of the kids and for the kids. But when you have 2 households, parents are not together anymore. So it's really difficult. And sometimes the only way you find out that parents are doing things differently is by the kids referencing what they did at mom's house or what they did at dad's house. It's ultimately important in a co-parenting situation that parents really try and put all their differences aside, the reasons why they got divorced or separated, and really look at some of the biggest issues facing their children's lives right now in present time. And that's the hardest thing of all. It actually sounds easy. That's a simple thing. Let's just no, it's not a simple thing at all. You have to do it.
I loved the term that you had used here talking about it is the emotional divorce. And if the emotional divorce has not been finalized, the emotional roller coaster will continue. And I love that's such a great term because the physical divorce and the emotional divorce, I think, are 2 very different things. And one can continue on a lot longer than the other. I find it happens all the time between, my exes and myself about, oh, well, I let them do this or they didn't let them do this. And, coming to a place to sort of come over that conflict. What are some of the ways that parents can help to make sure that their children are not in the middle of that emotional divorce?
I just interviewed a woman who we're presenting it on the Amicable Divorce Expert shortly. And she was a child of divorce. She was 10 years old when her parents got divorced. There was infidelity on dad's part. Mom has never forgiven him. It's 30 years later. And she still can't talk to her former husband, even though she's now in a committed relationship. You have to get therapy. You'll never get through this if you don't have the tools. So I think therapy is seriously important in order to get through the emotions that caused the divorce.
Absolutely. And I think, I'm sure Amy can attest to this as well, but when children are involved, and you said one of the ways that parents find differences is from, self-reporting by the kids. Oh, mom, let me do this. But really making sure that the kids aren't put in the middle to feel either guilty or bad or like they have secrets to keep. It's a tough balance, right?
Yeah. I mean, one thing that comes to mind too is such a theme of all the episodes we've been talking about again is communication. And I think, also when a child maybe is reporting something to one parent or caregiver, also kind of giving the benefit of the doubt to your partner, even when you don't trust that person or that's really hard, because then you are putting the child in the middle as kind of the most accurate reporter. And sometimes, children are young and they may misunderstand things or misconstrue things. It's kind of like the game of telephone, happening, instead of going kind of straight to the source. Or as they get older, they may also learn if I say to mom or dad or, whatever caregiver I have, this happened at this person's house, they're also very smart. So they may kind of, use that information in a way to try to, maneuver, towards something that they want as gain out of that. And so I think it's really important to establish, that those lines of communication with whoever, you're parenting with or co-parenting with.
Absolutely. And sort of backing up a little bit, I know we're talking about co-parenting, and for, a lot of our audience, they will relate to co-parenting as they've been through divorce. But for parents who maybe haven't had these conversations yet, or are either currently going through a divorce or are going to be going through a divorce, I'd love to be able to present them with some tools and some ways that they can begin this conversation with their kids.
It's never easy. Talk about an awkward conversation. That's about one of the most awkward you could actually find yourself in. So, number one, do not tell the kids separately. Tell them together. You have to have a united front. The kids have to see you be their parents in front of them, not two individuals telling you. And sometimes out of spite and anger, one parent will just blurt it out. Really think about and practice what you're going to say. What are the important things? You really need to have a roadmap when you're talking to your children. It just can't be, you know what, we're going to get divorced. Okay, let's go out to dinner. I mean, some people don't really understand that the kids need a new safety net. Their safety net was the house and two parents coming home every day and cooking and doing things together. That safety net is now taken away. They need to be told in that first conversation, well, what's it going to be like? How long are we still going to be living in this house? Are we going to have to move? How do we go back and forth between homes? Because don't forget, your kids have other friends who have been through divorce, and they kind of see what their friends go through, and they have their own questions. There have been many, many videos that everybody can research on YouTube about what kids worry about when a divorce is imminent, and they all have the same worries. Am I still going to have my same friends? Am I still going to go to the same school? What do I do if I forget something at the other house and I need it for school? And then every child, at the end of expressing all of these fears, says the exact same thing. None of that matters, except that their parents get along. That's all they care about. They can deal with anything. That's how important it is to put those issues aside, parents, and just move forward, making your children your only goal.
And I love what you said too about therapy. I think, parents who are going through divorce need to have their own therapist, their own therapy, because sometimes it does, you see conversations where maybe boundaries get a little muddy, kids know more than they should, kids feel like they're suddenly taking on information or emotional responsibilities of their parents, and being able to allow the parents their own places to process so that they can come and be there for their kids and their children don't feel unsafe, or that they're burdening their parents because they see their parents going through so much emotional turmoil.
So what will happen, and this just came out in the interview I did, and that was the girl, Despina Mavrido, she was primarily living with her mom, but loved her dad, had a great relationship with her dad before he moved out. Her mom cried a lot. Her mom did not get into therapy. Her mom was very upset over the reason for the divorce. And kids want to protect their parents. It doesn't matter what age. Don't you think so, Amy? They want to step up and be protective, especially with the parent that they're spending more time with. So in order to step up and be in a role that's really not the child's role, she decided parental alienation. She thought, well, if I don't talk to my dad, if I don't spend time with him, that'll make my mother feel better and she'll stop crying. What a horrible choice for a child to have to make, which is why therapy is so important. You need to get yourselves together as parents, as adults, as individuals, so that you can go through this very challenging time and do what the most challenging thing is, and that's raise children.
Part of that roadmap can speak to just what you're talking about, Judith, around, again, preparing your children to know, like, your job is not to protect me as your parent or caregiver. And, like you can set all of those things kind of in motion, to kind of get ahead of it.
Have you two ever heard the phrase best interest of the child?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
One therapist said to me, here's what you can do. Let's just say dad's coming to pick up the kids at 5 o'clock today, and they had plans to go out to dinner, movies, some other thing. And dad calls around 2 in the afternoon and says, hey, can I pick the kids up early? I'd like to go to Disneyland and would like to spend more time there. Instead of doing the combative response, well, wait a minute, this is my time. I don't want to give up 3 hours. Best interest of the child looks like this. Would my child love leaving earlier and spending more time at a theme park or not? And I said, okay, I can wrap my head around that concept. Jodie, what about you? What do you think?
I've been very fortunate over the years. My exes and I have really, it hasn't always been easy. But we have gotten to a place now where I'm proud of our co-parenting skills, because we've had to get over our own stuff. We've had to learn how to communicate. We've had to learn how to have disagreements without it becoming something personal between the two of us. We've had to learn how to show up to, parent-teacher conferences together and do all of these things together. And it isn't always easy. And, one of the things also, that, since so many of these awkward conversations series, is having to do with drugs and alcohol, one of the things that's really difficult, I think, also for parents, whether they're in the same household or not, but particularly in co-parenting issues, is the different ways that two parents may approach discussions about drug and alcohol abuse, or differing ideas of drinking and or drug use in different households. It may have been the cause of the divorce, which can bring up a whole other host of issues, or it may not. But I think that getting on the same page and having both households talk to kids about their expectations and how they are going to handle drug and alcohol use is so important for kids.
Consistency is such a key kind of component here. Humans are creatures of habit. Having routines and, kind of expectations set up are critically important for developing minds and children. And so having similar expectations, it needs to happen. It's not really, an argument up for debate, excuse me, and when it comes to, somebody who does this work every day, I guess what I would say is substances and substance use in young people is so detrimental to their development. And so again, this is a thing where, it's about looking at the science, it's looking at the research, and it's putting our personal experiences as young people perhaps aside and looking at, well, what do we know now about substance use and how it impacts developing brains? And really, my advice would be that people have to maintain very strict boundaries collectively as parents to, mitigate and minimize the substance use that their child may be experiencing.
Absolutely. And I'm sure it also makes then having that conversation with the child, particularly if they're middle school, high school, getting older, having more, freedom, experiences of their own. I'm sure it then only adds even more difficulty to those conversations between parents, particularly if they're not being honest about what's going on in their own lives and all of that. It really, suddenly the kids don't have any real gauge of what's appropriate, who to talk to, where to go to, because it's different across, in each household, and for each person is having a different viewpoint of it. So I think back to what Amy was talking about that consistency, and open conversations, and it getting through the emotional divorce between the parents to again come back to what's in the best interest of the child. Now, one of the things that we mentioned a little bit earlier is that, children of divorce statistically are 3 times more likely to use substances themselves and have problems with substances themselves. And that's in huge part because substance use is often tied to stress and to stressful situations. What are some of the the more detrimental things that you have seen or that you know of, that go on in divorced households or in the process of divorce that really help to add to the stress of the situation and to the stress of the children that are finding themselves in the middle. Because I know that parents would love to hear the things that they absolutely should not do.
It's using the children as messengers. It really is that. It's making the children responsible to communicate in instances where only the parent should be communicating. And if the children feel lost, if the children don't have, as Amy said, consistent rules for parenting, if the rules aren't very similar in both households, the kids don't have the foundation from which they need to operate. So I found two things go hand in hand: experimenting with drugs and self-harming.
Yeah, I think building on, a subject Judith already raised is the importance of having your own therapist, and a risk of not having your own therapist or some type of outlet of some kind, is that then you might make your child your therapist. And when you do that, you teach them that they're responsible for your feelings, and they might not really find space to be able to reciprocate that you can also be, that you as a parent are responsible actually for their feelings, not the opposite kind of way. And it puts a lot of, stress on a child where they may not know what to do with those additional feelings that are very difficult feelings. And again, when young people don't know how to cope with things like that, then they may turn to substances or self-harm or other kind of, dangerous activities.
Yeah, and we've seen that happen in so many, whether it's friends of ours or we've experienced ourselves when, we see parents putting their kids in the position that their kids know far too much about their reasons for divorce or the other parent's behavior or whatever's things that kids don't need to know and don't need to be a part of. And, Judith, I loved what you said, talking about how they need to it's a united front. The thing that every kid asks at the end of it is, do you guys still, do you still love me? Are you still my parents? Do you still, and that's it. That's all that kids want to know.
Saving lives means staying informed. Knowing the dangers of using counterfeit prescription pills can help those you care about and keep our community safe. As a parent, educator, neighbor, or friend, we all play a role in building safe and healthy futures for ourselves and our loved ones. Do your part. Take the first step today. Visit GetSmartAboutDrugs.com to access education, prevention, and treatment resources. Counterfeit prescription pills laced with fentanyl are deadly. Be their protector. Be informed. Visit GetSmartAboutDrugs.com.
Now, I know, these conversations are always easy between parents. And I think, Amy, you brought up some really good points about being able to talk to your kids honestly, even if you have questions or you don't know exactly how to have that conversation. What are some of the things that you can tell parents?
Yeah, I was thinking about, like, in some of the other episodes we've talked about, there's ways to be honest with your children without having to reveal all of the information or all of the details. And so, I think it is okay to say things to your children like, we're having a hard time figuring this out, but it's our job to figure that out. This is not your job as a child. Or, introducing like, I am considering maybe dating again. But like, I'm going to make sure that I communicate more with you about that. And I'm going to make sure that you're cared for, or, reassuring the child about that. And so balancing being honest, but without giving all of the information for them to then have to hold.
Right. Absolutely. And you brought up something really important too, which is, dating again after parents get divorced, whether they're, remarrying or whether they're just beginning to date. How do you recommend, what are the best ways to introduce a new significant other, talk to the other parent about that, and all of those things so that to again, lessen the stress on all members?
So this is a huge issue, introducing significant others to the children and to the other biological parent. Ideally, it would be great if the other biological parent could meet the significant other first. The reason why that would be ideal is so that the kids are not holding something, some information, if they're the first ones, that they're afraid to tell the other parent if they think the other parent doesn't know. It's a horrible situation.
Another tip I would think about is, preparing your child for, this possibility, or, and just checking in with them when it happens, or, the impending potential for it to happen, or how is it making them feel, what's kind of coming up for them, what will make this transition easier for them, and being able to let them know that, you hear their feedback and you'll try to take it. That doesn't mean that as a parent, you always can take their feedback, but I think it's helpful to kind of know what's going on in their mind, and to be able to then, potentially make a plan based on, kind of what they feel would make this easier for them, because it is hard. It's hard for, them. And it's hard when you're excited that you found a new person, that you care a lot about, and that you're excited, to kind of introduce into your life, but that they may not share that excitement, and honor that and be okay that this may be a difficult transition for them.
Now, let's say everything has gone along swimmingly. It's all good. And one of the parents is now remarrying or has remarried. What advice do you have for step parents who are now involved?
So little tips are like, what's the other biological parent like in their discipline and how they run their household? So you have a window on what's going on in the other house, and have a united front with the biological parent you're with, so that you're both in lockstep on everything. But then there are the other things. There are a celebration of holidays. They're very different in each household. How do you, as a step parent, introduce your traditions, or maybe you make all new traditions so that you're not stepping on anybody's toes? What do you do about gift buying? You have to work out being part of the gift buying experience for the other parent. This is all best if you get along as a step parent with the other biological parent. Communication and making your relationship the best possible.
I think sometimes, parents in different households being able to say, let me take a step back for a second, let me think about this, and remembering that you're the adult and that it is up to you to come up with solution and to present that united front, even when it's not easy. I think sometimes in divorce, keeping your mouth shut is the hardest part because, you just want to say your piece. And that isn't always, again, what's in the best interest of the child. Well, thank you, ladies, so much for joining me today and having this conversation. Again, it's not one that's always easy. And it is one that I think sometimes can sound a little bit difficult and daunting and overwhelming to people. But overall, I want people to know that children are incredibly resilient, and that if the adults in their life are willing to do the work and to, come together, that divorce doesn't have to be a recipe for disaster, that it can be an opportunity for all people involved to show up, to have honest conversations, to continue their support of their children. And that, if you come together and you do the work on yourself, that you can still raise incredibly healthy, wonderful, successful children who may even have more people in their lives that love them very much.
Coming up on the next episode of Awkward Conversations.
Social media is a place to connect. It's a place to find friends. It's a place to make ridiculous TikToks, all that kind of stuff. But there are a lot of opportunities and dangers for kids to find substances.
If you don't understand the threat of social media or the dangers of social media, you may not take it seriously enough and do the boundaries, the limits, and the monitoring that you probably need to do.
Social media, again, is such an extension of our real lives and our kind of everyday life. And so as a parent, have kind of permission to treat it as such.
Your child can now get this sitting on the couch. When you're upstairs doing some late night work on the computer, they can get it sitting on the couch and just run outside to the car and actually get a delivery.
Make sure to check out getsmartaboutdrugs.com. Parents, caregivers, you can find so many resources of great information there about how to talk to your kids and make these conversations a little less awkward. A huge thank you to the Elks DAP, which is the largest all-volunteer nationwide drug awareness program, and also a huge thanks to the DEA for their outreach program and for making this possible.
The views, information, or opinions expressed during the Awkward Conversation series are solely those of the individuals, speakers, commentators, experts, and/or hosts involved, and do not necessarily reflect nor represent those of the production, associates, or broadcaster, or any of its employees. Production is not responsible and does not verify for accuracy any of the information contained in the series available for viewing. The primary purpose of this series is to educate and inform. This series does not constitute medical or other professional advice or services. This series is available for private, non-commercial use only. The production, broadcaster, or its channel cannot be held accountable for all or any views expressed during this program.